William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the Park Cities Central Dallas Democrats meeting being held at the Park Cities Library, 8311 Preston Center Plaza, Dallas, Texas. Tell the librarian you are here for the Park Cities Central Dallas Democrats meeting and they will take you to the meeting hall. When I entered, I was greeted warm and friendly.
To meet here and making our move here so easy. They've been wonderful. Sharon Martin is the director here, and if any of you see her, be sure and give her a big thank you. They've been very hospitable. Today we have a big crowd. We have a lot of candidates. It's a new year, and we want to get off on the right foot. Obviously, we have a primary coming up, and so everything's important. What we want to start with right now, though, is our candidates. As you know, because of time constraints, we have a very important speaker today. Certainly want to have plenty of time for Dr. Jilson. What we'll ask you to do is to come up, give your name and what you're running for and your opponent to give us some context, and then a brief elevator speech. So those of you who are a candidate, please make your way to the front, and we'll just go, in order of whomever's here. And if you'll keep your comments to that, we'll appreciate it, and then we'll get started. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is David Hanchin. I'm a former district judge, and I'm running for the open bench on the 301st. As for my opponents, I've got so many opponents, and I can't keep track of them all at this point. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Lawrence or Larry Prager. I'm running for the 301st Family District Court. There are 5 people in the race. I'm in the race. David Hanchin's in the race. Mary Brown's in the race. Craig Bonham and George White. There'll be 5 candidates. This bench is a specifically designated family law bench. It's a special family district court. I've brought some literature that you can pick up. I'm your board-certified family law specialist candidate in the race, and I know we've got a long line, so don't forget to pick up a brochure on your way out. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Rose Renfro. I'm running for Dallas County District Clerk. I was formerly a Dallas City Council person, and I won the Democratic nomination in '06 for County Commissioner District 4. However, the Republican got 600 more votes out of 86,000 as I did in November. So we can't let something like that happen again. I do have 5 opponents. I don't see any of them here to visit with us today. There is no incumbent in the race. Chris Simmons chose not to run, and I don't mind telling you who they are. There's a Johnny Gomez. There's a very nice young lady named Kathy Sanchez. There's a Kissy Jones. There's a Tasha Harding, and then there's a Felicia Tripp. And I'm the only candidate that has business and administrative experience. I run a chain of tanning salons, a couple of air conditioning companies. I've been a mortgage broker, a real estate broker, and I'm also a trained mediator. I have the skills. I've done a payroll for employees before. I know when people need their checks and balances, and as you probably read in the paper, that there has been 2 instances where over $100,000 was taken from the district clerk's office, and that would be avoided if we had checks and balances. When the cash goes to one person, when we count it the other at the end of the day, 2 people should count it and sign off on it, and 2 people in different departments, so all that thievery will quit. And I'm sure there's some we don't know about. I was honored to be on the Dallas County Grand Jury for the last 7 years, 6 of which I was foreman, and I did hear this case on one of them. I can't discuss it because what stays in those 4 walls is confidential. So anyway, I'm going to ask you to please vote for me. My name is Rose Renfro. I'm running for district clerk. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mary Brown, and I too am running for the open bench of the 301st District Court, and I've been an associate judge in family law for the last 18 years. And before that, I was with the district attorney's office for 5 years, and I'm not going back before that, but I would urge you guys, if you want to know more, to look up at my website, judgemarybrown.com, and you can see all my qualifications. And I would like for you to since there are 5 of us, to do your, feel free to do the research, and I would love to have your vote in the primary on March 4th. And that's it. Thanks for having us here this morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bennett. I'll be really brief. I'm running for the 265th Judicial District Court. It is a felony criminal court bench. It's an open seat. The judge is retiring. Neither one of my opponents are here. I've been a prosecutor for 15 years. I handle all the homicide cases for the Dallas District Attorney's Office. I grew up here, went to SMU Law School, and I'm a precinct chair. I would appreciate your support in March. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Justin Lord. I'm running for the 283rd Judicial District Court. It is a felony criminal bench. The current judge, Rick Magnus, is here today. I've been assistant district attorney for 12 years. My career has been dedicated to making a difference in people's lives and making Dallas County a better, safer place. What I'm going to bring to the bench is my work ethic. I'm going to bring the fact that I'm a person who's earned a reputation as being fair, dedicated, and trusted. I believe that the people are the ones who hold these benches. The elected officials are accountable to the people. I will run a fair, efficient, and good court, and I would appreciate your vote. My name is Justin Lord for the 283rd. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Randall Grubbs, and I'm a candidate for the 330th Judicial District Court, which is another family law court. It's dedicated to family law, but it's not the one where there's 5 running. There's only 2 of us in this race. There is an incumbent that's in her first term that I am running against. I'm a board-certified family law specialist, the only one in this race. My background is I was an associate judge in family law court, served with Mary Brown for 7.5 years. She was there before and after I left. And also was Garland municipal judge for several years. Had a long time family law practice. Family law in Dallas County has been what I have done for the last more than 30 years. I know what's going on around here. I know the judges. I've actually practiced in just about every area of law. First few years it was general practice. I board certified family law, and that kind of naturally came my way. But I have a lot of experience in a lot of areas of law. I know how to run a court already, not because particularly I was an associate judge, but I watched that from that perch, that standpoint. I don't have a learning curve there of much at all if I take that on. I'm not going to get into talking about the person I'm running against, but go to my website. There are things that you can look up. There's things you need to know. I want you to all know this. I do not take it lightly running against an incumbent. I've been around a long time. I've known lots of judges in this county, and I've never, ever thought I would be running against one, to tell you the truth. But I felt compelled in this instance. If you'll do some checking out in other sources, you'll find out why. Thank you.
Excuse me, could I just ask you to keep these more brief? We're going on at much too much length. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Paul Ingram. I'm a candidate for Dallas County Treasurer. It's an open seat. Mr. Wells is in the back. He's not running. I have 3 other opponents: Pauline Madrano, a Benny Brown, and a David Bratt. I'm the only candidate with an accounting degree, and that's important for that office. I'm the only candidate who was interviewed by Mr. Wells for a first assistant position. So I'm the best choice for this office. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Warren. I'm the county clerk for Dallas County, and I will keep it short. I do not have a primary opponent. I just came to show my appreciation for all the support you've given me in my past 2 elections and for my upcoming election. Thank you.
I'll see if I can be almost as brief as that. I'm Rick Magnus, Judge Rick Magnus, elected in 2006, re-elected in 2010. Justin's running against me. He wants to bring a work ethic to the court. Just so you all know, 7 of the last 8 years, I've moved more cases than any other felony court. So I don't know if he's implying I don't work, but I do. The facts are there. I'll be in the newspaper tomorrow morning. Look for me. Google me, Rick Magnus. bill will speak for itself. Thank you.
Good morning. For those of you who think that I look like another candidate, I do. My name is Tracy Williams. My twin sister, Stacy Williams, is running for the 101st Civil District campaign. It is a contested race with Marty Lowry. Stacy is a lifelong Dallas citizen. And for those of you who were at the last meeting, you know that she has over 27 years of legal experience in different arenas, including political, on Capitol Hill, and in this county, and she served in the private and public sectors. What you might not know about Stacy is that besides graduating from the Hockaday School, Smith College in Massachusetts, and receiving her law degree from Georgetown University, Stacy's been very active in community activities in the Dallas. She has an extreme commitment to her home. Some of her civic responsibilities include serving on the Board of Trustees of the Hockaday School, Board of Directors for the Dispute Mediation Service, Board of Directors for SAVED, Community Advisory. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And those of you who've seen me, thought I was looking through you, it was me, it was my twin, Tracy. Thank you.
I will be real short. I'm Doug Skimp, Judge of County Criminal Court number 3, and like Mr. Warren, I don't have an opponent in the Democratic primary. I don't have an opponent in November. I'm here to thank this organization for helping me get elected in 06 and in 10, and to hear the speaker today. Thank you.
Hey everyone! My name is Lee Bailey. I'm running for House District 108. That's currently Dan Branch's seat. I have no primary opponent, and I'm here to tell you that things are looking really good. According to the NCEC, which amalgamates polls, a lot of polls in Texas and throughout the country, I'm at a Democratic Performance Index rating of 41%. If I can get to 42% by August, which I think is doable, then money from Austin, I've been told money for Austin will come. So I really, if you want to help me, the way you can help me is to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, endorse me. I need endorsements right now, and put up a yard sign. So thank you so much.
Good morning. I was going to ask for everybody else's extra time, but I don't think they have any extra time.
My name's Susan Anderson. I'm running for the 291st Judicial District Court. That is an open bench. The judge that was on that bench left the bench to run for district attorney as a Republican. So I'm running for the felony bench. Basically, on a felony bench, experience does matter. You're dealing with people's lives. It isn't a training court. You're dealing with cases where people can go to prison for life. You're dealing with cases where people could be assessed the death penalty. Experience does matter in this kind of court, and I bring 20 years of criminal law experience to this race. I also bring a board certification in criminal law. I bring published book on criminal law. I bring 15,000 criminal cases handled, 250 jury trials completed. Experience does matter, and I'm the only candidate in this race that has that kind of experience, and I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Good news, I'm the last person. And I'll be very quick. My name is Bonnie Goldstein. I am running for the 44th Judicial District Court. I could ask a test. If y'all want to know everybody's name now, can y'all name everybody's name who spoke today? Remember, I'm Bonnie Goldstein. I'm running for the 44th Judicial District Court. My 14-page resume is on my website. 23-year lawyer, 10-year judge, no controversy. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much. We want to get to our speaker in just a minute. I want to have Jean Soslow come up, our treasurer, just very briefly. And those of you at the Christmas party, it was a big success. We want to talk about that. Also, today is this is the first meeting of the new year. So it's time to renew your membership. For $25, you get all of this 12 times. So be sure and sign up with Jean at the end. If you're already a member, all you got to do is give him a credit card or a check or cash. And if you're new, then this is as simple as that also. We really would appreciate it. Also, our next meeting I do want to announce is with Darlene Ewan and Keith Harris. We have a forum, and so that should be very interesting, and we hope that you'll make that next meeting. Jean, would you do it, and then we'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Ann. Well, this was our first Christmas party that we actually came out ahead. We actually made a little bit of a profit, so that's really great. We usually lose a little, but this time we took in. We also collected $280 for the North Texas Food Bank, plus, I know, that is so great, plus a lot of canned and non-perishable goods. So everybody won. This is a win-win Christmas party, so I'm very happy about that. And as Ann mentioned, I'll take memberships for 2014 at the end of the meeting. So just see me, or if you want to leave a check, any of the officers, Mary, Ann, myself, or Bill, our Sergeant at Arms. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be on.
Okay, now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Phyllis, our Vice President in charge of programs, and she'll introduce our very, very special guest today.
This will probably be the shortest introduction in the history of introduction, but first of all, I just want to say I am so glad we booked this big room, and I am so thrilled that so many people turned out to hear Dr. Jilson speak. I had him for graduate school, oh my goodness, in the late 90s. I went back to college and did another degree, and he was just absolutely wonderful. And as you all know, he's spoken in a number of different locales on a number of different occasions, very highly regarded, former member of the Council on Foreign Relations, lots of experience at SMU and elsewhere, and he's going to talk to us today about Texas politics. So thank you.
It's good to be here. I was extremely impressed with the crowd until I saw people lining up against the wall all the way back, and that was quite a show. But it's a great pleasure to be here. I have 3 fans in the world. One is my mom, another is Phyllis, and I think the third spot might be open. So we could have nominations maybe. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's good to be a Democrat in Dallas County these days. I heard a number of the judges say they got elected in 2006, which was the breakthrough year, and then reelected in 2010, and almost certainly will be reelected in 2014. I think that 2010 race in Dallas County was the one that the Republicans had the best chance to break through against the Democratic slate, and did not. And so I think that Dallas, as well as most of the major cities in Texas at this point, are comfortably Democratic. But as I'm going to describe over the course of no more than 30 minutes, so that we have 30 minutes to talk, if that schedule makes sense, the state is going to be a very tough nut to crack for another decade, at least, a little bit more than that, I think, and I'll try to explain why I believe that's the case, despite all the work that Battleground Texas and a number of other groups are doing. There are some fairly intractable demographic processes that will need to run their course before Democrats will be very competitive statewide. But I want to mention a couple of books here. Since I'm a college professor, I almost have to carry books with me when I go somewhere. And so I brought 3 of them today. One of them I just finished this morning. All of you have heard about this book. It's by Bill Minutaglio and Stephen Davis, Dallas, 1963. This is a book about the political climate in Dallas in the early 1960s, say 1961 through the Kennedy assassination in November of 1963. And it is absolutely hair-raising. It talks about the undercurrent of right-wing groups in Dallas during this period, centering on Edwin Walker, a former Major General in the United States Army who was fired by Kennedy for proselytizing John Birch materials to his troops in Germany. And so this is a very interesting book. It is unpleasant reading in a lot of ways, but it will give you a sense of the political climate in Dallas 50 years ago, and elements of it remain. Dallas is a different place than it was 50 years ago, but the power structure in Dallas is not an entirely different group with different interests than they were 50 years or so ago. Conservative, organizational, and institutional influences are still very powerful. The Dallas Morning News isn't quite what it was in 1963. You'll be interested in that part of this book, so I would encourage you to get that. But there are still very powerful conservative interests in Dallas. In fact, we saw them run the 50th anniversary of the assassination just a few weeks ago to try to get through that with as little discomfort as possible. And generally succeeded, I think. But that wound is still, to some extent, unhealed because it's never been really confronted very directly. And then there are two other books that I brought along, and these are more self-serving because they're my books. This one is called Lone Star Tarnished, a critical look at Texas politics and public policy. I published this book about a year ago. It was discussed in the Dallas Morning News and KERA and other public radio and television stations around the state. It's a challenge to the idea of the Texas miracle or Texas myth, and tries to unpack the shortcomings of Texas public policy in regard to education and health care, all kinds of other policy issues, and also to explain the political culture of Texas in order to make those policy choices in regard to education and other issues more clear. Texas has always been a very conservative state. It remains so today. On most polls, Texas will be 10% more conservative than the country is, and that book tries to explain that. And this last one, Texas Politics Governing the Lone Star State, is a college textbook that's used around the state in Texas politics courses, which I've taught at SMU for a number of years. And even though all of you are involved in politics at one way or another, either elected officials or activists, there are a lot of nuances that remain unclear to a lot of people. And so you might look for those books. That Minutaglio book you'll hear a lot about because it's new, and as I said, I just finished it over the last week or so, and so recommend all three of them to you. What I want to do is to deliver some difficult news, and in order to do that, I want to start back very early in Texas history and then race forward and describe the history of the Democratic Party in Texas and how it came apart in the middle decades of the 20th century and became effectively inconsequential in the latter decades of the 20th century and sadly the first decade of the 21st century, and what it will take for the Democratic Party statewide to become competitive again. And so I'll be relatively quick, do it all in a little under half an hour, but I think it's important to describe the Democratic Party in Texas in its heyday and how that Democratic Party came apart in the mid-20th century and what the party is today, as well as what it might become over the next several decades. Texas was a Democratic Party before Texas was a state. Texas was part of the Jacksonian Democratic South. Thomas Jefferson is the father of the Democratic Party, president for the first decade of the 19th century. But the Jeffersonian Democratic Party was not a party that went all the way down to the grassroots, down to the local level. That happened in the Jacksonian democracy era, when the Jacksonian Democratic Party did become a modern political party with elected officials in Washington at the state level, all the way down to committed members of the Democratic Party at the local level, as you are in the Democratic Party today. Andrew Jackson was a politician out of Tennessee, and two of his principal lieutenants in Tennessee politics were James K. Polk, who went to the U.S. House of Representatives and then became president in the 1840s, and Sam Houston, who was a governor of Tennessee in the mid-1820s as part of that Andrew Jackson machine. So we had a very close personal relationship with President Andrew Jackson as President Sam Houston came to Texas in the 1830s, and his military experience in the militia was well used in the Texas Revolution, and so he became the leading figure in Texas from independence through the Civil War. And he was a Democrat along with Andrew Jackson, and the Democratic Party stood for, as it had from Jefferson to Jackson through Sam Houston, for small government, low taxes, states' rights, and white supremacy. And the Democratic Party stood for those things through the antebellum decades up to the Civil War. It was a one-party Democratic South against the northern Whigs that became the Republican Party in the 1850s. So the Civil War is the North and the Republican Party against the South and the Democratic Party. The North and the Republican Party defeat the South and the Democratic Party, and occupy the South militarily from the mid-1860s into the early 1870s. So that occupation, defeat in the Civil War and military occupation during Reconstruction, fixed a visceral hatred of the North and its Republican Party throughout the South and throughout Texas. So if Texas was Democrat from Sam Houston's first coming to the Civil War, it was hyper-Democrat after the Civil War and into the first decades of the 20th century, at a gut level, a visceral level that simply didn't permit one to even think about being a Republican. The Texas Democratic Party came back to power statewide in 1874, 1876, wrote the current Texas Constitution, and then spent the last quarter of the 19th century internally focused on the state of Texas to restore white supremacy and the values of the Texas Democratic Party from Jefferson to Jackson through the Civil War to the coming of the 20th century. So the Democratic Party stood for small government, low taxes, local control, even below the state level, and white supremacy, which Democrats restored by the 1890s, with support from the Supreme Court, but at the state level, the Democratic Party restored white supremacy, and then in the first decade of the 20th century instituted things like the white primary and the poll tax 1903, 1907, somewhere along those lines, to fix that white supremacy. And it is a conservative Democratic Party. There are some progressive Democratic governors in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. They are Democratic governors who look at an income tax before there is a national income tax, and look at an inheritance tax before it's adopted nationally, but they are turned back by a conservative Texas legislature. But in general, the Democratic Party is governed by a plantation elite and an urban professional class of doctors and lawyers and entrepreneurs that value the small government, low tax, local control agenda of the Democratic Party. And Paul Ferguson is a moderate face of that, but by the time you get into the 1940s, you're looking at people like Pappy O'Daniel, very, very conservative, very beholden to corporate and business interests. But the Democratic Party of the first third of the 20th century is a conservative, rural and urban professional business and corporate interest tool. And it continues to stand for that Jeffersonian, Jacksonian small government vision. And then the Great Depression occurs. Starts in October 1929 and runs all through the 1930s. An economic catastrophe unlike the country had ever seen, 2-3 times as bad as the Great Recession that we went through 5 or 6 years ago. 25% unemployment, 40% shrinkage of the economy, 90% collapse of the stock market, thousands, tens of thousands of businesses fail, and the country goes down in the early 30s and remains down. The 1920s, the Republicans control the national government. 1930, the Democrats take control of the Congress, and in 32, Franklin Roosevelt is elected Democratic President of the United States and is elected a total of 4 times through the election of 1944. The South is one-party Democrat, and they elect their members early and send them into old age, so they have very high seniority, and a slew of Texas Democrats are chairing the major committees in the U.S. House and in the Senate. They are conservative Texas Democrats, but they say to Franklin Roosevelt, all hell is broken loose at home. We're in the middle of a great recession. Our people are starving. We hate big government, but do what you got to do. We will support you. We know what that means. It means more federal involvement. It means more intrusion, but we see no other choice. We will support you in the New Deal. And many of them did, but many of them did grudgingly until the middle of the 1930s, where Roosevelt has won in 1932, ran and won a second term in 1936. No president has stood for more than a second term. Roosevelt decides that he is insufficiently able to control the Democratic majorities in the Congress to get his New Deal passed, because these Southern conservative Democrats who pledged their early support are unwilling to stick with him for the full ride. And so he calls people to the White House. A man named Hatton Sumner out of Dallas is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. Very important committee. Lyndon Johnson is a member of Congress. Sam Rayburn is chairman of the Commerce Committee. A man named Buchanan is chairman of Ways and Means. These are very powerful people, all of them Texans, and Roosevelt asks them for additional support in the Congress and tells them about a plan
that he has to execute in 1937 to break the Supreme Court and force it to stop striking down his New Deal legislation. And he says, for all of those old conservative Supreme Court justices who are more than 70, I'm going to get the Congress to pass a bill that lets me appoint a new Supreme Court justice for every one of these old guys. I'll have a majority on the Supreme Court within a very brief period of time, and those sons of bitches won't be able to block my New Deal legislation anymore. Are you with me? And these are Southern Democrats, and they see tyranny afloat. And they say, Franklin, we've been with you all the way up to here. We haven't given you everything you want in Congress, and the Supreme Court has blocked much of what we did give you. But your attempt to break it is tyranny. Remember what's going on in Europe, right? Mussolini, Hitler, all this kind of stuff. Southern Democrats, small government people saying this is tyranny. And on leaving that meeting in the White House, Hatton Sumner says to other Texas committee chairmen, boys, this is where I get off the train. I'm going to stand against Roosevelt. I'm not going to support him even a little bit, going to oppose him. And Franklin Roosevelt's vice president, who was he? Yeah, Cactus Jack Garner. John Nance Cactus Jack Garner. Out of Uvalde, Texas, a very conservative Texas Democrat. As Vice President of the United States, he would preside over the Senate on occasions when close votes were expected. And after 36, 37, he's sitting up there when Roosevelt's bills come before the Senate, going like this, holding his nose. You know, he's with Sumner that the old man has gone too far. And in fact, Garner runs against Franklin Roosevelt for the presidential nomination of the Democratic Party in 1940. And Roosevelt sweeps him away very easily, but that gives you a sense of the opposition that is formed in Texas to Roosevelt. And so Roosevelt doubles down and says, since Sumner and Garner and many other conservative Texas Democrats are against me, I'm going to go to Texas and I'm going to campaign against him in the 38 congressional elections. And he does. Comes to Fort Worth, sweeps through West Texas, campaigning against him, goes through the rest of the South, trying to defeat conservative Democrats, which he generally doesn't do. But that series of events, from court packing to the 38 elections to John Nance Garner running against Roosevelt in 1940, break the Texas Democratic Party, and it never comes back together. As you move through the late 1930s into the 1940s, the Texas Democratic Party breaks in two. The Democrats of Texas are the liberal and progressive Democrats. That's Lyndon Johnson. That's a young Ralph Yarborough. It's even Buford Jester, who was a moderate Democrat governor of Texas. But you can think of Lyndon principally as sticking with Roosevelt and the National Democratic Party. So the Democrats of Texas are the liberal, national, progressive, moderate Democrats, and the Texas regulars are the conservative Democrats. And so the Texas regulars are going to be Hatton Sumner's and former Vice President Garner, but it's also going to be Coke Stevenson and Pappy O'Daniel and just a lot of others. Alan Shivers, 1950s, as a younger man is a Texas regular. And the Texas regulars become the Dixiecrats as you move into the late 1940s and 50s. So the Democratic Party splits, but there is no Republican Party, so it doesn't make that much difference. And the contest is between the National Democrats and the Conservative Democrats. So they fight over control of the Democratic, the Texas State Democratic Central Committee and those kinds of things. But there's effectively no Republican Party outside of Highland Park, River Oaks, and Alamo Heights. But because the conservatives, the Texas regulars, are at odds with the liberal national wing of the Democratic Party, and one of the most famous events in the National Democratic Party history of the 20th century is the Democratic National Convention of 1948, in which a young Minneapolis mayor named Hubert Horatio Humphrey stands up and makes a speech calling for desegregation and equal rights. The Democratic Party to stand for those things, stand up for those things, and a young Strom Thurmond gets up and leads a walkout of the Southern Democrats. And so the Texas regulars are looking at this at the national level and saying, oh shit, what's going on? You know, the Democratic Party is moving away from us. And so they are not committed to the Democratic Party other than as a vehicle to control and govern Texas. And over the course of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and later, the Texas regulars will leave the Democratic Party very slowly and become the basis for the Republican Party of more modern times. The Democratic Party never heals from those splits. And its first taste of reality comes in 1960, when John Kennedy is Democratic nominee for President of the United States. He thinks he needs the South. He's a Massachusetts Democrat. That meant then what that means now. So in Texas, made a lot of people nervous. So he said, Lyndon, come on the ticket with me, and we'll see if we can win this thing. Lyndon was risk averse, and so he got the Texas legislature. He wasn't sure John Kennedy could win, and so he said, I will be a vice presidential candidate, but he got the Texas legislature to allow him to run for a Senate seat. At the same time, Kennedy did win very narrowly, so he was vice president, but he had also won re-election to the United States Senate. He had to resign that seat. There was a special election in which 75 candidates ran. There was one meaningful Republican, a man named John Tower, who had contested that Senate seat against Lyndon Johnson in the 60 regular election. And Johnson won it about 60-40. But John Tower had established name recognition in that race. He was the only meaningful Republican in the special election for the U.S. Senate seat. And there were a raft of Democrats because Texas was a Democratic South. A man named William Blackley had been appointed interim senator by Governor Shivers. He was a very wealthy Dallas conservative Democrat, hated by progressive Democrats in the state. But Jim Wright of Fort Worth was a candidate in that race, and the great man Henry B. Gonzalez of San Antonio was in that race as well. And so the Democrats split it all, with John Tower running first, William Blackley running second, and Jim Wright running 3 points behind Blackley and running third. Jim Wright would have killed Blackley in the runoff. I mean, would have killed Tower in the runoff if he had run second. But Blackley, because he was hated by liberal and progressive Democrats, they said, all right, we're going to teach Blackley and Shivers a lesson. We're going to stay home. Right? Democrats can be petulant. You might not know that. But they can be. And they were in this instance. And John Tower won that race. But everybody said, well, yeah, that's just a one-off kind of thing. Doesn't mean anything. Vote got all split up. People hated Blackley. So we don't have to make any changes. You go through the 1960s, but there's stuff happening in Texas, and one of them is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is very active. He was a Democrat, became a Republican. In the late 60s, he is moving around Texas. He's a spokesman for GE and for corporate clients, and is making a name for himself in Texas. Kennedy is shot. Johnson becomes president. Voting Rights Act of Civil Rights Act of 1964. Civil Rights Act of 1965. Voting Rights Act of 1965. Johnson is reported to have said to a young Bill Moyers, that Civil Rights Act is going to cost us the South for a generation. He meant 3, right? 3 generations so far. But a lot of ferment in the South. And a lot of Democrats begin doing what's called presidential republicanism, voting for Republicans for president, but sticking with Democrats at home because they're mostly conservative. Into the 1970s, Texas still looks like a Democratic state, but 1978 is the critical year in the beginning of the real rise of the Republican Party, not 61 when Tower won, because as United States Senator, you can't really do very much. You don't have appointment powers, you can't send contracts, can't do very much, you can show the flag. But Bill Clements ran for governor in 1978 against John Hill, and very few people gave him a chance, including him, who knew that Democrats had been elected governor for 100 years. He was up, he was next. But Clements had a lot of money and worked very hard in a rapidly changing environment. Texas went for Reagan over Gerald Ford in 1976. So conservative republicanism in Texas was growing. And in 78, Bill Clements won the governorship. And as governor, all you judges know, half of the judges are actually appointed to the bench for the first time rather than elected, because the governor gets to appoint judicial openings. And so all of those commission seats, about 3,000 of them the governor gets to appoint, all those open judgeships. So what Clements was able to do was start building a Republican Party with patronage and giving people political experience, and the party began to grow, but Texas was still a Democratic state. So Clements was defeated in 82, came back and won in 86 to serve a second term, but more importantly, Ronald Reagan is president from 80 to 88. And Ronald Reagan looks like what Texas think a conservative should look like. And so a lot of Texas conservatives said, my daddy would roll over in his grave, my granddaddy fought for the grave, I just can't stand it. I am going to Ronald Reagan and Ronald Reagan's Republican Party. And so a relatively substantial movement in the 1980s. And then in 1988, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan's vice president for his 2 terms, is elected Republican president of the United States, and he is a Texan. And so lots of Texans look at that Bush election in 88 as he's our guy. And so we're moving over and we're supporting him, and now we're more comfortable voting down the ticket. So school board, Texas TEA races, some judge races, and other down ballot Republicans begin to get elected in 1988. But Ann Richards wins in 1990. And people think that that means that the Democratic Party is secure, but in that election, 2 Republicans win statewide office. And those are Kay Bailey Hutchison for Secretary of State and Rick Perry for Agriculture Commission. So Ann Richards wins the governorship, but you start seeing Republicans winning judicial offices, lots of local offices, and now statewide offices as well. 1994, George W. Bush stands against Ann Richards for re-election and defeats her relatively handily. And in 94, you still have Democrats getting elected statewide because Bob Bullock wins by almost 30 points. So you've got George W. Bush winning relatively easily, but you've got Democrats winning in blowouts. 98, Bush is reelected overwhelmingly. He gets 67% of the vote against Gary Morrow. And all the Democrats are swept out. No Democrat has won a statewide race in Texas since that 94 election where Bullock won. After 98 forward, they have not. In 96, the Republicans took control of the Texas Senate. 2002, they took control of the Texas House and have had carte blanche ability to govern. With Democrats, over that period of time, Democrats who have some political credentials, maybe elected experience, have been able to come. Well, let me just tell you briefly in 98. In 1998, John Sharp lost to Dewhurst, I think it was, by 6 points. And Paul Hobby lost a race to Rylander for controller by a half a percentage point. So close. But since 1998, credible Democrats have lost by 12. Incredible Democrats have lost by 30. Right? So credible Democrats like Chris Bell have lost by 12. And a lot of people without experience lose by a lot more than that. So that 12-point level of futility is your baseline from today. And that baseline has not changed in a dozen years. The Dream Team in 2002 lost by 12. The 2012 candidates lost by 16, right? So that's where you are. You're sort of in the lower half of the teams as a structural deficiency. And the future hinges upon the demographic change taking place in Texas. And so you hear a lot about battleground Texas and the growth in the Hispanic population, and Hispanics vote 2-to-1 Democrat. All of that is true. That rapid growth in the Hispanic population has been taking place since the 1970s and will continue to take place into the middle decades of this 21st century. But the Hispanic vote dramatically underperforms. In the 2010 census, 38% of Texans are Hispanic by ethnicity. The voting age Hispanic population is several points less than that because it's a younger population. The citizens of voting age, remember the Hispanic population is 38. The citizen voting age population for Hispanics is about 28. And the percent of votes cast by Hispanics in statewide elections goes between 18 and 20. So 38% of the population, 18 to 20% of votes cast, and that has not moved in a decade. Not moved in a decade. And until it moves, that 12-point barrier is fixed. You can have an election. Remember that 2008, how cool that was for Democrats, right? Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, fighting tooth and nail in Texas. Democrats come out of the woodwork in your neighborhoods. You had no idea, though, all these Democrats were around. And they're shaking hands, high fives, slapping each other's back, and then 10, right? So, the other thing, Anglos in the 2010 census are 38% of the population, but they're 56% of the citizen voting age population and they cast 68% of votes in statewide elections in Texas. Right? So the Anglo population turns out at well above presence in the population. The Hispanic population turns out at well below. And I'm not saying sometimes. Right? Right? This is just structural. Think about this. Anglo-Texans vote Republican 70-30. And if they cast 68% of votes in statewide elections, do the math. Pretend it's both 0.7. 0.7 times 0.7. 49%. That means you need 6 drunks to get over 50%, right? So if Anglos vote 70% Republican and cast very nearly 70% of votes in statewide election, that is the majority. And then Republicans get 1/3 of the Hispanic vote and 1/10 or less of the black vote. And that will put you to 56, 57% if you just multiply those things out. And that is your 12-point majority. So the question is, how rapidly is the Hispanic presence in the population going to be turned in to an increase in percent of votes cast in statewide elections in Texas? That is the work of the Texas Democratic Party. And if you see it being done, tell me about it. Right? There are a number of things that need to happen. A very substantial number of Hispanic Texans are not U.S. citizens and therefore cannot register and cannot vote. Naturalization has to be part of the Democratic agenda. It's a very long-term thing, but you've got to work on naturalization because only about 40%, a little less than 40% of Hispanics who were legalized by the Reagan 86 immigration reform have become U.S. citizens, right? So many Hispanics want a green card in order to be able to work comfortably and legally, but are less interested in citizenship. Democratic Party has to work on naturalization, and then it's got to work on voter registration, and then it can work on turnout. And it's going to work on all 3 of these things at the same time, but there's got to be a long-term focus on naturalization, and then a focus on voter registration, because Hispanics register at about 2/3 the rate that Anglo and Black Texans do. So work needs to be done there as well, and then turnout is lower. People argue that the demographics will make the Democratic Party in Texas competitive in the middle of the next decade. 2024, 2026, 2028, depending upon the election. That doesn't mean the Democrats can't win an election before that. But it does mean that structural 12-point deficit is going to take a while to close up. And I will end on this very sour note, which is it might be a little longer before the Democratic Party of Texas can become regularly competitive, because Republicans had a dramatic fundraising advantage on Democrats. If you remember the Chris Bell race, Chris Bell in 2006 was running against an incumbent governor, Rick Perry. He raised a little more than $1 million up to the debate. And then he showed well in the debate. There was him and Perry, Kinky Friedman, and Rylander, and money came in, a couple $1 million more money. But the race had been over for 2 months, right? And so, I've got a lot of numbers over there you won't be surprised to know on fundraising on all of these races. And because the Republicans have been so confident of holding Texas, tremendous amounts of conservative money go out of state to affect national elections. Bob Perry of Houston died earlier this year. Harold Simmons of Dallas died just a week or so ago. Those were the two of the top 5 Republican donors in the country over the last couple of decades. And a lot of their money is going to play outside of Texas because Texas is comfortable. All that money's coming home when it starts to look like this. So, there's a lot of work to be done. And it's very systematic, in the trenches, dirty, unrewarding kind of work. But there are places they're doing it. Down in Austin, they did I think it was like 6 square block area where they increased voter registration by double digits. So it's going to be a long, hard slog. I apologize for going over. We probably could have done it with a little less Andrew Jackson and a little more 2014. But my sense is that Wendy Davis runs inside that 12-point margin, but it's hard to imagine that she wins the election. We'll know a good bit when the fundraising numbers come out next, because she had about $1 million. Abbott had $22 million, and she did the filibuster. But her next fundraising report is going to be critical, because if she's got 20% of what Abbott does or 25% of what Abbott does, that's a big problem. Because in Texas, you need between $1.5 and $2 million a week from the end of the summer to when voting starts to run a big, hard-hitting statewide campaign, because it's very expensive. And if you go into that with $5 million or something, there's just no way in the world that you're going to be able to do that. Very last sentence. The one thing that surprises me about the Abbott campaign so far is that he hasn't done to Wendy Davis what Bill Clinton did to Bob Dole in 1996. Bob Dole was going to be the Republican Party nominee. He had no money. Clinton just clobbered him in June and July.
Obama did to Romney.
Yeah. If you've got money, it doesn't make any sense to sit on it. And if your opponent doesn't have money, you can be in there pounding on them. So I'm a little surprised that that's not happening. But look at those numbers. Again, I'm sorry I droned on, but you invited a college professor. You should have known.
So how much money does Wendy Davis need to run a competitive campaign?
Yeah, it's a minimum of $20 million. You see, I always say $20 to $25 million because you want to be sure that you've got enough to work on name recognition all the way along. You've got to have a turnout campaign, but then you've got to have enough media to close relatively strong. You see Democrats saying that they believe that she can raise $40 million, and these are professional Democrats. Ben Barnes, pulled up in Washington, D.C. Our former congressman here from the Martin Cross says he thinks she can raise $40 million. That would be magnificent from a Democratic Party perspective. And I rarely say this when I'm not right next to the door and with Democratic groups, but I often describe Democrats as having short arms. Really good for talking, but not long enough to reach their wallets. So, watch those fundraising numbers, they will tell the tale. Yes, ma'am.
I remember my parents telling me that Alan Shivers ran on both the Republican ticket and the Democratic ticket. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could do that back in the 1950s. Alan Shivers is a fascinating guy. He led Texas Democrats to Eisenhower in 52 and 56. So, I mean, when you talk about conservative Democrats, already by the late 30s, 40s, into the 50s, they know that the National Democratic Party is just not home. So you got Strom over in South Carolina, and you got Shivers over here, and they both. In fact, Jimmy Burns was the governor of South Carolina at that time, and Burns and Shivers headed Eisenhower organizations in 52 and 56, and that was really the first Republican breakthrough in the South. Eisenhower was born just up the road here. He was raised in Kansas, but when he would campaign in the South, he would stand when they played Dixie, and they played it all the time, and he would stand and put his hand over his heart, and conservative Southerners would just swoon.
Oh, yes, of course.
I got him out from you.
Oh, yes, now I understand that up until the 90s, before he held statewide office and he was a state representative, that Rick Perry was a Democrat. Now, at that time, I was living in Southern California, so obviously not really paying attention to Texas politics, but what kind of a Democrat was he? Was he a moderate or a conservative Democrat?
He was a conservative Democrat. He was a rural West Texas Democrat. Maybe you remember Pete Laney? Vaguely? Pete Laney was Speaker of the House.
Oh, yes.
Before he was unhorsed a dozen years or so ago. And so West Texas Democrats are conservative. And he was. And as you go through the 70s with Clements, and particularly the 80s with Reagan, Phil Gramm moves in 1983 out of the Texas Democratic Party into the Republican Party. He resigns his House seat, wins it, and then wins the Senate seat. Perry moved in 89. Perry is a very careful guy. And by 89, it was entirely clear. And Phil Gramm told him that the future of a bright young man like you in Texas politics is in the Republican Party, not the Democratic Party. Now, at this point and going forward, you're getting your very first Republicans moving into the Democratic Party. You had a judge do that, judge from over in Fort Worth, who was a Court of Appeals judge, I think, running for re-election as a Democrat. But if you remember, there were a lot of Democratic judges in Dallas up into the early 90s who became Republicans, and some of them have moved back over to the Democratic Party. Judges particularly do that because they're supposed to be nonpartisan anyway, and you really, I'm not to blame judges for doing that too much. You can blame other people, but not so much judges. So he was always conservative. I'll go here in a minute. I'm a political science professor, so I don't actually deal in concrete evidence. Do the best I can. I think there
facsimile of concrete.
Yeah, right.
It can be synthetic.
It will be synthetic. There are some things that help that I didn't mention to show how solid that margin is. Somewhere between 60% and 2/3 of votes in Texas are straight ticket votes. So, those votes could be cast today, right? Or March or November. They're already in the can. If you vote straight ticket, you vote regularly and out of habit. And there's a 5 or 6 point margin for the Republicans in the straight ticket vote. And then the non-straight ticket vote is what people sometimes describe as a swing vote, but that vote is easily moved by all that advertising money that comes late in the race. And if you think about Abbott's fundraising over Wendy Davis, and then go down to think about whoever the lieutenant governor is against Letitia Van de Putte, right? And then once you get below that, it's very difficult to name the Democrats. You have former statewide Republican elected officials in all those offices. You got George P. Bush running for land commissioner. All of them are going to raise a lot of money. It might be that Davis and Van de Putte can raise significant but not equal amounts of money, and then it trails off really, really fast. And so that money is going to be heavily on the Republican side. And so that swing vote broke 2-to-1 Republican in 2012. So there has to be an argument, a rationale, a reason to give to think that normal 12-point margin isn't going to hold. And one reason is that Davis is an attractive candidate. And her fundraising may show that she can bring in money. She'll be good on the trail. She'll be intriguing to female voters. But, you know, think about those straight ticket numbers again. Intriguing is one thing. Dinner table conversations are another. Because do you think the paterfamilias of the family is going to be intrigued?
No.
That's right.
But the mother might be.
The mother might be. What? Is mom going to go toe-to-toe there in the living room?
Yes.
No.
Maybe. Could be. Some of them will. Some of them will. And that's why I say I think Davis runs inside the margin. But you've got to think of a lot of movement to close that gap. So, you know, makes no sense to give an actual number, but what the hell. 7 or 8.
I'm old.
No, excuse me. I told this fellow here, now come to you. Yes.
Taking the dinner table as a jumping off point. There's a lot of people that are noticing that the middle class is shrinking badly, and that's true in Texas, even though we're not at that off the south. I'm wondering if, when you're talking about the demographics and a heavy focus on the Hispanic, we're not really overlooking the fact that we can shift, and the Anglo population has been voting against its best interest for God knows how long now, and their ability to talk to our neighbors along those lines that we have been voting against our best interest.
Yeah, there's a book called "What's the Matter with Kansas?" that is on that thesis, white Southerners who are poorer than whites in the rest of the country are foundational to the Republican majority, and so when you say that poor whites are voting against their interests, that assumes a fairly straightforward economic calculus where they think I might get more out of government programs for schools and other kinds of things than I would pay in increased taxes, but that's obviously not the calculus they're making. They're making some other kind of cultural calculus that leads them to think that a Republican vote is in favor of some other interests they might have, even if it's against some interests. So, and as you say, they've been doing it for a long time. So that either suggests that people are really dense. That you can explain to them for decades that this is not what you ought to be doing, and still they do it. It means that that's probably not going to be your way out. Yes, sir.
I'm an old government teacher too.
I can see that glint in your eye.
But I think factor that everything you said is factual. But one thing is probably going to be different. Look at what happened in Virginia last year. There are a lot of disgruntled women in Texas. And Mr. Abbott is not, he's just putting kindle on the fire. And that may be the outcome.
Yeah, it's possible. I certainly know that the Democratic Party is hoping that that's the case. They've got their fingers crossed and eyes closed really, really tight. And it could turn out, and I think it will be evident on the margin. But whether or not it's enough to close a big part of that gap, I mean, what you need as a Democratic Party in Texas, out of Wendy Davis, you'd love to have a win, but what you need is a strong race. You've got to have a race that is in the single digits. You'd love to have it in the mid to smaller single digits. You'd love to see decent fundraising and a Republican Party with its eyes this wide because they just had a close call. If you get something in that mid-single digit race, you have something to build on. If you get something worse than that, then it's it indicates that it's going to be a good long time. Let me go to this lady here, since she's the hope of the Democratic Party.
Right, I want to what role do you see Facebook and Twitter and social media things playing in this upcoming?
Yeah, I'm an old guy, so I'm not the best person to ask. They play a significantly larger race in national campaigns, and they're beginning to play a significant race in statewide campaigns. In fact, starting in 2004 and increasingly in 8 and 12, they were very important and more important to the Obama campaign apparatus than to the Republican side. They're working on it now. So it's increasingly important, but sort of middle-aged and older Anglo politicians in particular don't understand it well enough. I'm thinking of Abbott. Twitter thing about Wendy Davis that got him in a lot of trouble a couple of months ago. So it seems like an email to them, like they're sending it to somebody, but it's it's going out much more broadly, and they don't react to that. So more, but how much more I really can't say. We'll go here and then now all the way back.
What you said earlier, the case was the same in 2008 with Obama. It's ugly, it's boots on the ground, it's going to be registering folks, it's going to be knocking on doors, it's going to be calling. We did it in Michigan. We took a Republican district and we made it blue. It can be done in Texas, but it's ugly. It's really sloggy.
Yeah, Battleground Texas says they understand that it's the work of a decade, and they need to understand it that way. You hope that lightning strikes earlier, but you got to be prepared to put in that time. You can do the lady, and then I'll come back.
Okay. What I wanted to ask you regarding Wendy Davis, have you not considered the enthusiasm that she brings into a room and the difference between herself and the last two Democratic gubernatorial candidates? Bill White was a very nice guy, and so was Chris Bell, but they did not have the charisma that Wendy Davis has. And when she walks into a room, she's ecstatic. And going back to the Obama-Hillary campaign, people came out of the woodwork. I worked those elections, both the primary and the general, as opposed. And I can tell you this much, people were coming in for the Obama ticket or the Hillary ticket, and I think Wendy Davis is going to have the same effect. And I hate to differ with you, but I think she's going to be our next
I think it's very important that that be the consensus of the room. I've got a little bit different role. I remember that Bill White campaign, and I also remember speaking to Democratic groups before that election, and everyone was very pleased that Bill White was a business-friendly, moderate Democrat in the Lloyd Bentsen mold. That was going to be the ticket. He's not going to scare anybody. There are going to be lots of moderate independents who will come out and vote for Bill White. So, there's a rationale to believe that good things are going to happen in most elections, but making that rationale bear fruit on election day is tough.
I would just...
I lied, man behind you, and then you.
Why do you feel that the Hispanic turnout is so much lower in Texas than it is, let's say, in New Mexico or Colorado?
Yeah, that's a good point. The turnout in Texas in general, among all voters, is among the very lowest in the nation. We never run over 46. We've actually been 50th, the lowest turnout. So it's very low. That is not accidental. If you go back to the beginning of the 20th century, when I was talking about white primary and poll tax and all that kind of stuff, are voter suppression devices so that you get a controlled, more affluent, comfortable, conservative electorate.
White.
Yeah. And so that low turnout is contrived and developed. The thing that I always say to people is, I remember back in the late 90s, the Texas Secretary of State would run one voter registration and turnout commercial. You have not seen the Secretary of State run a commercial like that in more than a decade. Right? Just hope that the election passes, nobody hears about it, let alone gets involved in it, because that lower turnout sort of bends up and bends Anglo. And so, you know, the voter ID is a part of that. Now, I do not believe the Republican argument that only a very few people will be inconvenienced and no one will be unable to vote as a result of it, nor do I believe the Democratic argument that 700,000 honest, well-meaning, loyal Texans will be barred from the voting booth. But there'll be a significant number. You know, it'll be in the tens, maybe, could be the low 100,000, something like that. So it's a big deal. But the turnout among Hispanics is that turnout for Anglos and blacks is now even, with blacks voting at a higher rate than Anglos nationally and very close to Anglo rates in Texas, because blacks have been focused on government, the federal government in particular, for the good things that it might do, and the state government for the bad things that it might do, but focused on government and understanding the importance of elections and voter turnout and participation. Hispanics don't have that same history and have not been given to understand that their participation is invited, let alone expected. If you read that great Texas novel, Giant, 50 years ago, remember what the owner of the ranch, what's his name?
Vic Benedict.
Yeah, Vic Benedict did with the vaqueros? Held them on the ranch, locked them in. Yeah, because they might make a mistake. They might not know how to vote right. And if you think of the Texas political culture, you just ask yourself, if you were Hispanic, would you feel invited? Would you feel empowered to become part of Texas politics?
Not even Democratic Party.
Well, the Democratic Party, you know, the Democratic Party has done a little bit better. But I do think that if you look at going from Boyd Ritchie to that's a big change. That is an important change. But you know, if there's a guy in the Texas Democratic Party that is sobered by current circumstances, it's Hinojosa, right? Because this move from Boyd Ritchie to me, we can do all this stuff. This change is going to come relatively rapidly. The resources are modest. The institutional structures of the Democratic Party are very modest. The fundraising lists are very thin. It's very difficult. So my assumption is, first day in the office, he was going to go gangbusters, but it's, and I'm sure he's still as enthusiastic as he can be, but it's got to be a sobering set of circumstances to look at. Yes, ma'am.
I would just share what I've heard from Wendy Davis fundraisers, that she was receiving donations from America.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I often get asked by Republicans and conservatives and media people, you know, will there be a problem that so much of Wendy Davis's money comes from outside the state? And I said, well, Greg Abbott will certainly make a big deal of that. But a lot of George P. Bush's money comes from out of state as well. And if you can get money from out of state, you'd have to be an idiot not to do it, right? Yeah. So she needs that money. She's going to take that money. But if her media people aren't already working on a whole series of responses that she's going to need to make to those kinds of questions, and questions, frankly, about her personal business dealings, if she's not working on that stuff right now, when the election starts for real, that's what's coming. And there's going to be a lot of money behind it, and we'll see whether she has anticipated it and is able to respond in ways that people who are not paying attention deem credible.
I just don't understand. It seems like politicians come to Dallas and use it as an ATM machine. So why isn't there fundraising capability in Dallas? for the rest of the state.
Yeah, there is fundraising capability in Dallas, just not for Texas elections. Right? The people that come to raise for national campaigns. And Republicans in statewide campaigns don't have any trouble raising money. Perry could raise $30-40 million for a re-election at the drop of a hat. He had a group between his first election on his own in 2002 and the one in 2006. He had a Century Club. And I can't remember exactly how many people were in it. I have the idea that the number approached, well, I don't know. But being in the Century Club, it was in the hundreds, 200, 300, 400. Being in the Century Club means that you promise to give $25,000 a year for the cycle, for $100,000 overall. And so it's easy to raise money for statewide elections for governor, $30-40 million. Tony Sanchez spent $70 million of his own money against Rick Perry in 2002 and lost by 19 points. So money isn't the only thing, but it's an important thing to have. The other statewide races, $10-12 million for lieutenant governor, 5, 6, 7 for those others. But you can raise money. Depends upon what you're raising it for and from whom you're trying to get. If you're raising it from wealthy and corporate interests to maintain the status quo, then by all means, how much should the check be for? But if you're talking about changing Texas, the people that you go to, there are a lot of people doing very well in Texas, and they're not looking for a lot of change. And the people who are looking for a lot of change, my kids going to school, I got to make sure there's good school, I don't have health care, are not in a position to write big checks. And the trial lawyers have been very supportive for a decade and more, and at some point they go.
Dr. Jilson, maybe just one more question.
Okay, this person needs to be really special then, right?
No.
Yeah? Yes, sir.
What does the Democratic Party have to do to convince my dumb cousin that lives in a trailer house in Higo, Texas, or my dumb brother-in-law over in East Texas, that they are voting against their economic self when they vote for Republicans? What do we have to do?
Well,
sledgehammer.
Yeah, this being filmed, but I'm not sure exactly where it's going to be shown. I assume it's not going to be shown out in East Texas, so I'll go ahead and make fun of you. But the northern counties, half of the state, in Mississippi, Louisiana, over into East Texas, gave Obama high teens. Right? Those folks aren't actually thinking about their economic interests.
Nope.
Right? They're not saying, I'm worried about Social Security. I hope it'll be there. Don't have health care. I really like that. Obamacare. That's just not the calculus. So, East Texas used to be the home of yellow dog Democrats. And now you get some of your high vote totals. That and the Panhandle vote very heavily Republican. So, I think all you can hope that your brother-in-law out there does is bring beer to the picnic. You can't really plan on changing his political views, but you don't want him being cheap. All right, thank you very much.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or follow us, or subscribe to us and get notices all our videos. We love it even when you call. So when visiting the Park Cities Library, tell them you want your reservations to the Park Cities Central Dallas Democrats meeting. Space is limited.